A nurse earns $95,000 a year in Sydney. After rent, groceries, and transport, she has $380 left at the end of the month. Same nurse, same skills, same lifestyle. Austin, Texas. She has $1,100 left. Same income bracket. Different country. This video runs the numbers she did not run before she moved. Every year, thousands of Americans land in Australia convinced they made a smart financial move. By month 3, half of them are doing the math again. By month 6, some are booking flights home. This video is the math they should have done before they left. But wait, before we begin, please subscribe to ensure that you never miss out on any of my essential stuff. Comment I subscribe below and I will personally welcome you to our community. With that said, let's get started. Before we go anywhere, one number you need to lock in. As of April 2026, 1 Australian dollar equals approximately 70 US cents. Every number in this video will be shown in both currencies. You will not need to do any mental math. 5 categories: rent, take-home pay, groceries, healthcare, and the monthly bottom line. Each one has a winner. The overall verdict may not go the way you expect. Rent. Let's start with the number that destroys most financial plans before they even begin. Rent. In the United States, the national average for a one-bedroom apartment is $1,627 US per month. That is the national average. In Austin, Texas, a popular mid-tier city, you are looking at $1,400 to $1,600 per month. In New York City, that same one-bedroom is $3,300. Now, Australia. The national median rent in Australia hits 702 Australian dollars per week. That is 2,800 Australian dollars per month, or approximately 1,960 US dollars per month. Already above the US national average. But that is the national median. The cities most Americans actually move to are Sydney and Melbourne. Sydney. Median rent for a one-bedroom apartment, 817 Australian dollars per week. That is 3,270 Australian dollars per month. In US dollars, $2,289 per month. Melbourne, $595 to $650 Australian dollars per week. That is $2,380 to $2,600 Australian dollars per month. In US dollars, $1,666 to $1,820 per month. Here is what that looks like side by side. Austin, Texas, one bedroom, $1,500 US dollars per month. Sydney, one bedroom, $2,289 US dollars per month. That is $789 more per month for a comparable apartment. That is $9,468 more per year. Just in rent. This is the part nobody plans for. You see the Sydney number listed in AUD on a property site. Your brain does a rough conversion. It feels about the same. It is not. Mini verdict. Rent. The US wins in virtually every city comparison except New York. In Sydney specifically, Americans pay 30 to 50% more for equivalent housing than in a comparable US mid-tier city. Take-home pay and tax. You may already be thinking, but Australian salaries are higher. That is true. On paper, here is where it breaks down. Let's use a clean example. A software engineer, $120,000. Same job title, same experience level. United States, Texas, which has no state income tax, $120,000 gross. Federal tax, approximately $20,000. FICA contributions, $9,180. Take home, approximately $90,800 US dollars per year, $7,567 per month. Australia, 120,000 Australian dollars gross. Income tax, approximately $33,400. Medicare levy, $2,400. Take home, approximately $84,200 Australian dollars per year, $7,017 Australian dollars per month. In US dollars, $4,912 per month. Let me hit you with those numbers again. Texas software engineer take home, $7,567 US dollars per month. Sydney software engineer take home, $4,912 US dollars per month. Same job, same level. The Sydney take home is $2,655 less per month in real purchasing power. Now, some will say, but what about superannuation? Your Australian employer deposits an additional 11.5% of your salary into a retirement account. On $120,000, that is $13,800 per year. Real money, but you cannot access it until you are 60 years old. It does not pay your rent in 2026. And here is the detail most people miss entirely. Australia's top tax rate of 45% kicks in at 190,000 Australian dollars, which is approximately 133,000 US dollars. In the United States, the 37% federal rate does not kick in until $609,000 for a single filer. High earners get taxed harder, faster in Australia. That is not an opinion. That is the published tax schedule. Mini verdict, take-home pay. The US wins on liquid income, particularly for mid to high earners. Australia's superannuation is a real long-term benefit, but it does not help you pay rent today. Groceries. And this is before we touch groceries. Because the grocery comparison is the one that genuinely shocks Americans the first time they walk into a Woolworths. The United States has some of the cheapest groceries in the developed world. Australia does not. A standard weekly grocery shop for one person. In Australia, 2 liters of milk, 3.50 Australian dollars, 2 US dollars and 45 cents. Loaf of bread, 4.50 Australian dollars, 3 US dollars and 15 cents. Dozen eggs, 6.50 Australian dollars, 4 US dollars and 55 cents. 500 grams of chicken breast, 9 Australian dollars, 6 US dollars and 30 cents. 1 kilo of pasta, 3 Australian dollars, 2 US dollars and 10 cents. Total weekly basket, approximately $120 to 150 Australian dollars. That is $84 to 105 US dollars. In the United States, that same basket runs $70 to 85 US dollars per week. That is a consistent 20 to 35% premium on every grocery shop. Multiply that by 52 weeks. Australia, $4,368 to 5,460 US dollars per year. United States, $3,640 to 4,420 US dollars per year. The gap is real. It is consistent, and it compounds every single week. Mini verdict, groceries. The US wins. Groceries are 20 to 35% cheaper. For a single person, the annual difference is approximately $700 to 1,000 US dollars. Healthcare. This is the one category where Australia wins. And it wins clearly. In Australia, Medicare covers GP visits, emergency room treatment, most specialist consultations, and public hospital stays. For permanent residents, basic medical care costs you nothing out of pocket. A GP visit in Sydney, $0 if bulk billed. Emergency room, $0. Public hospital surgery, $0. In the United States, healthcare is not a fixed cost. It is a variable that can end your savings. The average American with employer-sponsored insurance still pays approximately $1,400 per year in premiums for individual coverage. The average annual deductible before insurance pays anything, $1,790. A single ER visit, even with insurance, can cost $2,000 to $5,000 out of pocket. Without employer coverage, self-employed, freelancing, between jobs, an individual plan costs $500 to $700 per month. That is $6,000 to $8,400 per year. Before you have seen a single doctor, let me hit you with these numbers. Healthcare costs for a healthy single person in Australia, approximately $0 to 420 US dollars per year. Healthcare cost for a healthy single person in the US without employer coverage, $6,000 to $8,400 per year minimum. This is the part nobody plans for when they leave Australia for the US. You do not realize how much mental overhead the American healthcare system carries until you live somewhere it is not a problem. Mini verdict, healthcare, Australia wins. It is not close. For Americans moving to Australia, Medicare alone can represent $5,000 to $8,000 in real annual savings. Transport. Transport splits depending on where you live and how you move. If you own a car in Australia, you will pay more. A new mid-range car, a Toyota Corolla, costs approximately 31,000 Australian dollars in Australia. That is 21,700 US dollars. The same car in the US runs approximately 24,000 US dollars. Australian car prices sit 15 to 25% higher than American equivalents, before you factor in stamp duty and registration. Fuel. Australia currently sits at approximately 2 Australian dollars per litre, the equivalent of 5 US dollars and 30 cents per gallon. The US national average, $3.30 per gallon. Australia is more expensive. However, if you live in Sydney or Melbourne and use public transport, the equation narrows. Monthly public transport pass in Sydney, 230 Australian dollars. That is 161 US dollars. New York City monthly transit pass, 132 US dollars. Los Angeles, viable public transport barely exists. A car is not optional. For the majority of American cities, where a car is a basic requirement, the US comes out cheaper overall on transport. Mini verdict. Transport. US advantage for car-dependent lifestyles. Near draw for major city public transport users. Australia's higher car prices and fuel costs tip this category to the US in most scenarios. The monthly bottom line. Now let's put all 5 categories together. Same person, same lifestyle, 12 months. Sydney versus Austin, Texas. $100,000 in local currency. Sydney, gross income, 100,000 Australian dollars. After tax and Medicare levy, 73,000 Australian dollars. That is 51,100 US dollars. Rent, 1 bedroom, 42,000 Australian dollars per year. Groceries, 7,800 Australian dollars per year. Public transport, 2,760 Australian dollars per year. Healthcare out of pocket, 300 Australian dollars per year. Total expenses, 52,860 Australian dollars. What is left? 20,140 Australian dollars per year. 1,678 Australian dollars per month. In US dollars, $1,175 per month. Austin, Texas. Gross income, 100,000 US dollars. After federal tax, no state income tax, 78,500 US dollars. Rent, 1 bedroom, 18,000 US dollars per year. Groceries, 4,420 US dollars per year. Car, fuel, insurance, 8,400 US dollars per year. Healthcare, employer plan, 1,400 US dollars per year. Total expenses, 32,220 US dollars. What is left? 46,280 US dollars per year. 3,857 US dollars per month. Stop. That is not a rounding error. That is $2,682 more per month in your pocket in Austin than in Sydney, on the same income bracket. The Australian number looks larger on a job posting. The American number goes further. And before anyone says it, yes, the Sydney worker has superannuation building in the background. 11,500 Australian dollars going into retirement that year. Real money, but it does not move the monthly number. It does not pay rent on Tuesday. Final verdict. So who is actually better off? Here is the honest answer. On pure monthly spending power, the United States wins. In most cities, at most salary levels, Americans retain significantly more liquid income after expenses than their Australian counterparts earning equivalent salaries. Australia wins on healthcare. Completely. If you have a chronic condition, a family, or any medical history, that advantage is worth tens of thousands of dollars per year in real terms. It is not symbolic. It is structural. Australia also wins on workplace protections. Minimum wage sits at 24.10 Australian dollars per hour. Redundancy pay is mandatory. You cannot simply be let go with 2 weeks' notice and no recourse. But if you are a healthy professional, comparing what you actually keep at the end of the month, the United States currently comes out ahead. And the gap is larger than most people moving to Australia expect. Australia rewards certain types of lives. The US rewards certain types of earners. The mistake is assuming one country wins for everyone. Here is what I need to know. You have seen every number. You know the rent gap. You know the tax hit. You know what healthcare actually costs on both sides. If your take-home pay in Australia is $2,600 per month less than in the US, but you never receive a medical bill, is that a trade you would make? Drop your answer below. I read every single comment.